Hey, how's it going? We're going to be looking at something pretty neat today. We're going to be looking to see how to bake out our procedural materials into one standard material. So how do we bake out those 2D texture maps? So we've got our high poly version here, which has 6 procedural materials that give it, these metal, leather, glowing metal look to it. And we've got our low poly version here, which has nothing, has no material associated with it. So we're going to make this look like this. Super exciting. Let's just jump right in. We're going to have that selected and we are going to head over to UV editing. So we've got our UV editing windows open. I opened an extra window here to look at the shader editor. I would recommend doing the same. It's very, very helpful. I'm going to head over to our material properties for our low poly model, and I'm going to create a new material. And I'm going to call this low poly matte. And then I'm going to find the grid, and I'm just going to select all of these and unwrap them again just to make sure it's the right unwrap for my mesh. That looks pretty good. We don't have too much empty space. That's good to go for our baking. You can fill more space by making certain elements larger, but you just want to be careful you don't shift the aspect ratios between objects too much, because then you might get like very high resolution faces in comparison to other faces, and that might not blend well for your object as a whole. So the basic unwrap does its best to maintain the aspect ratios, the relative aspect ratios. So keeping that as close to, it as you can while also filling space is what you want to do to get as much out of your 2D textures. Now we've unwrapped it, we're going to start creating our 2D texture map. So first thing I'm going to do is create the normal. So hammer normal, I'm going to make it a 2K texture. I tend to make my normal map textures and my color textures slightly higher resolution than my other textures. So I'm going to add an image texture into the shader editor. I'm going to select the normal and I'm going to select non-color. Now we're ready to start baking. To bake, I'm going to head over to the render settings. Render engine change to cycles. Baking is a feature of the cycles render engine. GPU compute, if your GPU is decent. Head down to bake. My stuff is already open because I worked some kinks out, before I started filming to make sure everything would work. But normally baking is closed and normally combined is the default selection. Go down, click normal, click selected to active, click cage. I find cage extrusions to be easier than max ray distance settings to use, so I always select cage. And 0.09 is a good value for me. If I click out of edit mode, you'll see an annotation up here where I was measuring the distance between my low poly matte and my high poly matte at kind of the furthest gap spot, which was up here, and it was 0.077. I knew 0.09 would be a good value for me, but you might need to mess around with that a little bit. I'm going to click this. I'm going to control click this, and I'm going to click bake. And so a good normal matte bake will have colors like light purple, magenta, turquoise. A bad normal matte bake will have colors like red, yellow, orange, dark green. If you see those colors, that's corrupted normal data or bad normal data. And you're going to need to change your settings. Or you're going to need to go into texture paint. If you've adjusted your settings to as optimal as they can be and they still are not good enough, you might have to go to texture paint and scrub out portions of your normal map that are just corrupted. That looks great. This normal map is perfect. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a vector normal map and normal and select that. And we can look at how it looks for each step of the process, but I kind of know these are going to work. I'm just going to look at each step at the very end. So we're just going to keep chugging right along. The next thing I'm going to create is an emission map. I'm going to call this hammer emit, and I'm going to make it 2048. Sorry, 20 for 10. I'm going to make it 1024, which is your standard 1K pixel amount. So 1024. I'm going to make the emission 1K. I am going to actually create it, which I did not because I clicked away from it. Let's try that again. Alpha unchecked, click OK. Now we've created that. Now we need to pull it into our shader. I'm going to add a texture, image texture, find our emission image texture, and select, don't select anything. Default's good. It is sRGB because you're going to have color in your emission map. Head over to bake, go to emission, and bake that guy out. And because our normal map was good, the normal map is good, the rest of your bakes are probably going to be good. Like most likely your normal map is the one bake that's going to show you all of the weaknesses of your settings. Once you have that worked out, the other ones should fall in suit. That looks good, and now I'm going to go and bake out my roughness texture. So hammer roughness, make that one 1K as well. Pull that guy into here. Zoom in, make sure I had the right one selected. Select non-color. Roughness is black and white data. Head over to here, choose roughness, bake that out. And that looks good. Something I should have been doing the whole time is you should really save these as you go. So I'm going to save the roughness. I'm going to open up the normal. I'm going to save the normal. I'm going to open up the emission, I believe was the one that the one I saved yet. I'm going to save that. All right, so now all those guys are saved, which is great. We're not going to lose them in this next part, because what we're about to do in the next part is we're going to adjust the shaders of our original high poly mesh, because you can't bake metallic by any standard means. So you got to get a little creative when baking metallic. So let's head back into shading. Uncheck that. Click this. Open up your materials so we can select through. And our goal here is to bake metallic. We can't just straight up bake a metallic. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull metallic into roughness. So let's just pull our metallic data into roughness. For all the things, and that means for things like leather, which have no metallic, we need to make sure they also have no roughness. We don't confuse the roughness of the leather with, get that data in our metallic bake. Head over to here. So these ones are values. So I'm going to copy that value. I'm going to paste that value. And there, I'm going to drop metallic off. That's a big thing. When you're baking the metallic map, you don't want any actual quote-unquote metallic data, because all of your metallic stuff will be in the roughness. And in fact, having metallic data can sometimes throw off your other bakes. You need to be really careful about having metallic data in your materials. I know there's metallic down here as well. I'm going to put that into roughness, and I'm going to drop off the metallic. All right, so now all the materials should be good to go. So I'm going to head back over to UV editing, exit edit mode, bring this guy back, click that, shift click that. Did we create the roughness? we need to create the metallic map. So let's create hammer metallic. 1K is good. Click OK, head up here and let's add it in. One's also going to be non-color, very similar to roughness. And now we're going to click this, shift select that, make sure that's selected, and down here, and actually that's good to go. We're baking roughness again, but this time we're pulling all that good metallic data. So that looks awesome. So I'm going to save that. And I'm going to pull that into metallic. The next thing is color. And so a big thing when baking color is that you need to have no metallic data. So let me head over to the high poly. What I mean is that while baking a diffuse bake for color, which we're about to do, if you have any metallic data, so this is anything other than 0, your color will come out black. And that's just a feature of Blender. It's a weakness of their baking system and in handling metallic data. What we've done here to bake out the metallic as roughness is actually good because it's cleared out metallic from all of our materials. They're all 0. So we're good to go and to bake the color map as is right now. That's something you really need to be careful about, is you need to make sure you don't have any metallic data when trying to do this bake, which is diffuse, unselect, direct, and indirect. That deals with scene lighting. Make sure only color is selected. And let's head over here. Let's create our color. So hammer color. I'm going to make this 2K, so 2048 and 2048. So 2K and no alpha is fine. Click OK. Select that guy, excuse me, and then pull in image texture. Select our color, sRGB. Click this, control click that. Make sure color is selected. Diffuse, only color. These are our normal settings. Click bake. And we should get the color of our individual materials. So that looks awesome. That looks exactly like what we want. So I'm going to head over here. I'm going to save that. I'm going to drag in color, and boom. Just like that, we have now baked out our procedural texture into one nice. I'm going to go to EV to show you so I can check bloom so you can see the emission happening. But I'm going to uncheck that. And I am going to delete. Delete that. We can take a look as we plug in one of these at a time. Let's unplug all of them. Let's go through the textures and we'll see what we just built out. If I head over to rendered mode, you'll see this is our mesh that is just smooth. It's got nothing to it. I'm going to drag in the normal. And already you're like, wow, look at that difference. You've got our hammer with all of its fine detail and nice and smooth bottom as well. So that's awesome. Head over to emission. Let's grab the emission, pull it into there. I'm going to take a little second to calculate, and that's our emission surfaces, which look pretty good. There is no emission there, which is interesting. Oh, that's because this is going to be dark red. The way the emission procedural material was you had some spots that had a lot and some spots that had none. It'll be clear once we pull in the color, but let's bump the emission by a bit so we can see a nice little glow. That's cool. Let's head to, let's do color next, just to get a feel for the hammer. I'm gonna drag in the color. I'm gonna calculate. Now you can see what I mean about the emitting spots, as you had that dark red there. Now that's cool. Our colors look pretty sweet. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna pull in roughness. And boom, we got some shininess to our hammer. And the last thing is to make our metallic elements look metallic. Where is it? There it is. So boom, just like that, we have our low poly game asset ready hammer. And for reference, let's look at a side-by-side comparison of this is our low poly. Their high poly is going to look a little funky right now because we did a bit with adjusting the, let me turn face snapping off. We did a bit with adjusting the color. We lost the metallic. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to save this as a Battle Axe V2. Save as. And then I'm going to go to File, Open Recent. Battle Axe this is not the Battle Axe. It's PBT. Battle Axe was a different project I was working on. I got confused myself. Either way, this is fine for what I'm about to show you. But this is just the file before we made all the changes we just made. So this was our original high poly hammer with all the correct materials. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to append from Battle Axe, which is here. So this is what we misproperly named just now, but we're going to go in here. We're going to collect object, and we're going to collect Warhammer V2, which was the thing we were working on. So that was confusing, but that I knew which file was the one I needed, and I'll go back after and I'll name it the right thing. But here we go. This is the side-by-side, the moment we've been waiting for of the high poly versus low poly bake. The first thing I notice is the emission. This guy seems to be a little bit too high and a little bit not as red as the other one, which is all right. The rest of it looks pretty top notch. But yeah, that's it. We're done with our process. We have baked out our procedural materials, and you can see the difference, where you like zoom in here and it's like, you can get here without the clipping. You can zoom in here and this is your procedural material and you just have insane level of detail because, this is like this is using noise data that's like infinitesimally small in comparison to a normal texture that you'd apply to a surface. Now if we head over to our thing, you see it carried it forward, but it's pixelated, it's a little like blurry, and that's just what's going to happen because you can't have this level of detail on a game asset. That would be insane. It'd be crazy. You'd have like a 32K image texture. But this is good. This is good enough because oftentimes you're only going to look at the game asset from like this distance, and from this distance they look pretty good. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope this was information I hope this was useful information for you on your Blender journey. And yeah, have a great day.